Cuba commemorates the 70th anniversary of the assault on the Moncada and Carlos Manuel de Céspedes barracks, led by Fidel Castro, with the aim of overthrowing the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista. Ecuador's authorities suspended school activities and militarizes security as violence hits Esmeralda's provinces. And the second Russia-Africa summit will begin in St. Petersburg on July 27-28 under the motto for peace, security, and development. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Wednesday, Cuba commemorates the 70th anniversary of the assault on the Moncada and Carlos Manuel de Céspedes barracks, led by Fidel Castro with the aim of overthrowing the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista. With the presence of Army General Raúl Castro Ruz, the leader of the Cuban Revolution and the first secretary of the Central Committee of the party and president of the Republic, Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, the central act for the 70th anniversary of the assault on the Moncada and Carlos Manuel de Céspedes barracks began. Over 10,000 people representing the Cuban population in the former military fortress began the celebration in remembrance of the historical leader of the Cuban Revolution, Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Ruz. Attending the event were two other commanders of the revolution, Ramiro Valdés Menéndez, assailant of the Moncada, and Guillermo García Frías. Some 269 friends of Cuba from 26 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, North America, and Europe also gathered there to pay tribute to the heroes of the day of national rebellion in Cuba.
Taking advantage of the hustle and bustle of the Carnival of 1953, the assault on the Guillermo Moncada barracks, the second military fortress of the Batista dictatorship, took place, an action with which the generation of the centenary would start the small engine that would start the big engine of our revolution until today, as Fidel expressed it.
In the meantime, the Cuban president pointed out that the assault on the Moncada was the beginning of the Cuban uprising against U.S. imperialism.
The actions of July 26, 1953 were the beginning of the end of the last dictatorship installed in Cuba with the moral and material support of the United States. For that reason, they don't forgive the revolution. For that reason, and because they thought that with the physical disappearance of the historical generation, they could break the national independence, the international solidarity, the defense of the socialist alternative to the savage capitalism.
In the same vein, the Cuban president pointed out that the policy of sanctions and blockade implemented by Washington against the island is a consequence of the Cuban emancipation in pursuit of a socialist project.
More aggressive and intolerant they have shown themselves to be by constantly asserting that there is no force in the world that can make us renounce those principles, that can make us renounce those Marxist but also Marti and Fidelista ideals that inspire the tireless struggle for the greatest possible social justice. This explains the severity of the economic blockade and the current validity of the reinforcement measures maintained by the government of Donald Trump and the escalation of the blockade.
Ecuador's Esmeralda province suspends school activities and militarizes security as violence hits the region. After the intense day of violence perpetrated this Tuesday in several sectors, the Provincial Security Committee decided to adopt measures to maintain order and confront the insecurity that has been affecting the population. Likewise, the Ministry of Education has ordered the suspension of on-site activities in the educational institutions in at least 4 localities. Meanwhile, the agency indicated that it will evaluate the development of the situation in the territory and will inform about the return to on-site classes as soon as the conditions allow it. On Wednesday in Chile begins the national strike of teachers for 24 hours to demand a change in the financing model of education and the payment of the historical debt in what will be the second strike during the government of Gabriel Boric. The national president of the Teachers College, Carlos Diaz Marchant, arrived on Tuesday at the government house to deliver a letter to President Boric with the aim of responding to the legitimate and just demands that the union has been raising for more than a year. This strike will affect about 5,000 public academic establishments in the country. In this sense, organizers pointed out that Wednesday's strike will be for 24 hours, while on August the 2nd it will be extended for 48 hours. On Tuesday in Mexico, the interdisciplinary group of independent experts denounced the different levels of involvement of all state corporations in the disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students back in 2014. The group of independent experts denounced the lies and omissions of the part of Mexico's military authorities at the time about the disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students in September 2014. The sixth and final report on the Ayotzinapa case found that several then officials at different levels knew what happened to the 43 students and concealed and manipulated information from the municipal and state police to the federal police, the army, and the state intelligence agencies. And Mexicans recreate indigenous rebellion and celebrate the feast of Saint Santiago in Tonala, Jalisco. Hundreds of Mexicans honor their ancestors while honoring the life and work of Saint Santiago. The apostle has been celebrated for 400 years, every 25th of July for a week, during which dances such as the Tastuanes and Matachines are performed. In the traditional dance of the Tastuanes, the battle between the Tonaltec natives and the Spanish conquistadors or conquerors is symbolically represented. The main characters of Saint Santiago or Santiago el Mayor, who according to tradition made an appearance in this fight and before whom the indigenous warriors put their abilities into play.
The tradition is based on the battle between the indigenous natives of this place and the Spaniards, who arrived here on March 25, 1530. Well, this dance is derived from that confrontation the natives had.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the United States, on Tuesday, more than 80 Amazon drivers started a strike in front of a company warehouse located in the Palmdale area of the state of California. Drivers of Amazon.com left their jobs to protest against the company's return policies, its impact, and the working conditions they currently face. Protesters assured they took legal action against the online retailer giant in a case that could have significant implications in Amazon's labor policy within the United States. On 2022, the magnate of electronic commerce and cloud computing has faced several protests and strikes by its human capital.
It's been very horrible, to be honest with you, since start to finish. It's been a horrible thing to do. The working conditions, the vans, the phones we use, the treatment, it was just all bad.
California politicians have shown their support by first just coming out here, saying, coming to our members, talking to them, really hearing their stories and putting that out there. A lot of our LA politicians and elected officials are leading the way towards them.
And on Wednesday morning, a construction crane collapsed in Manhattan, injuring 5 people. The incident occurred at a vacant construction site on the 10th Avenue and 41st Street. Firefighters responded to a 5-alarm fire at the site. New York City officials said to expect emergency personnel, smoke, and traffic delays in the area the city's emergency notification system said. According to the New York Police Department, 5 people suffered non-life-threatening injuries as a result of the crane collapse, while the crane operator remains missing. And moving on to other topics, the second Russia-Africa summit will begin in St. Petersburg on July 27th to 28th. This important event is attended by 49 African delegations and, as on the previous occasion, is being held under the motto for peace, security and development. Alexander Polyakov, Deputy Director of the Africa Department of the Russian Foreign Ministry, said that half of the countries will be represented by heads of state and government. The senior official noted that African countries demonstrate by their attitude their firm determination to develop relations with Russia despite unprecedented pressure from the West. In St. Petersburg, Russia and African countries will agree on a joint action plan until 2026. Moscow will also offer African countries help with food problems after the suspension of the grain agreement. On Wednesday, the Russian President Vladimir Putin assured his nation will continue to help African countries to strengthen their sovereignty. In his greeting to participants and guests at the Russia-Africa Economic and Humanitarian Forum, the president said that Moscow will continue to fully assist African countries in strengthening their sovereignty and taking a more active part in solving regional and global problems. He also stressed that Russia supports the aspirations of the countries of Africa for socio-economic stability and progress. This meeting is part of the second summit of the Russia-Africa Economic and Humanitarian Forum that will take place on the 27th and 28th of July in St. Petersburg. And in Portugal, a forest fire spreads rapidly on the outskirts of Lisbon, taking residents and authorities by surprise. This is a construction news. The fire started in a forest close to Alcabidache, an area of Cascais, a city located on the outskirts of the Portugal capital. Around 77 people were evacuated from the area as a precautionary measure, while fire crews and the fighting planes were working to try to control the fire. According to the mayor of Cascais, Carlos Carreiras, the wind gusts that reached 60 kilometers an hour were causing a great problem for the 400 firefighters working on the ground on various fronts to extinguish the flames.
We have already enabled some control zones if necessary. Above all, we are waiting for the wind to decrease. It is the greatest difficulty for the firefighters. Some gusts every 60 km an hour have caused considerable fire projections at a certain distance.
And China decreed the highest red alert of its 4-color system before the next arrival on its coasts of Super Typhoon Doksuri. According to the China Meteorological Center, Doksuri is expected to impact the coastal areas of the southern provinces of Fujian and Canton on Friday morning. The typhoon, which has registered a wind force of level 17 near the center, it is expected to arrive in the Bashu Channel, the strait between the Philippine island of Yami and the Taiwanese island of Orchids on Wednesday. The phenomenon is expected to move towards the northwest at a speed of 10 to 15 kilometers per hour, with few changes in intensity from the center. Local authorities estimate that this typhoon, catalogued as the first to reach the red alert level this year, may be the strongest to impact in the eastern area of Canton. And in the Philippines, Typhoon Doksuri made landfall on a group of islands and hit the northern provinces of the country. According to the authorities, at least 2 people died and thousands were displaced as a result of the strong winds of 175 kilometers per hour, accompanied by rainfall that affected on the roofs of rural houses, causing flooding in low-lying areas and destroying trees. The tropical phenomenon also caused rivers to overflow and left thousands of people without electricity. And TeleSUR English launches its own videos on demand site for you to go and revisit or interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings, and more. Just go to the top left corner in our website homepage and click in the video option to access our VOD platform. And now we will have a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Beijing denounces a cyber attack against a state-run center in the city of Wuhan. Preliminary evidence suggests a U.S. origin. According to the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mao Nin, the attack detected affected the earthquake monitoring center of the central province of Hubei in Wuhan. She also pointed out that this action represents a serious threat to China's national security and therefore condemns the attack as an irresponsible act. For its part, the Foreign Ministry denounced that the government agencies of the Asian giant are subject to massive cyber attacks almost daily, and most of them originate in that North American country.
According to reports published by relevant Chinese institutions, hacking organizations with the background of foreign governments have carried out a cyber attack on Wuhan Earthquake Monitoring Center, which poses a serious threat to China's national security. We condemn this irresponsible act mentioned above. China will take necessary measures to safeguard its cybersecurity.
On Wednesday, several Indian opposition parties filed 2 motions of no confidence against the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. While these motions are expected to fail due to Modi's party having a clear majority with 303 seats out of the 542 in the lower house, they serve as a symbolic move to push for a debate on critical issues, including the ongoing deadly wave of ethnic violence in the volatile northeastern region of the country. The Indian National Congress Party, part of a newly formed alliance of major opposition parties ahead of next year's general elections, has reportedly obtained authorization for the no-confidence vote from the parliament. For a no-confidence vote to proceed in the Indian parliament, the support of at least 50 members of the House is necessary, a threshold the Congress Party is expected to achieve without complications. On Tuesday in Cairo, Egypt, the alliance of Sudanese opposition parties dubbed Forces for Freedom and Change concluded its first internal meeting since the outbreak of the conflict in Sudan. The alliance established in a first statement a series of points to stop this conflict that began on April 15th between the army and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces. According to the alliance, premises such as the unity of civil organizations and the demand for commitment to peace initiatives as fundamental to end the conflict, which has so far left almost 4,000 dead and more than 3.5 million internally and externally displaced. Meanwhile, the opposition parties maintained their rejection of the participation of the National Congress Party of the former dictator Omar al-Bashir.
At the meeting, participants urged for the need to National Congress Party classified as a terrorist organization due to the crimes it committed, including dividing the country, genocide, igniting the ever 15th war, seeking its continuation and supporting hate speech, racism, and dividing the country.
On Wednesday, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reported that Israeli forces have shot and killed a Palestinian youth during confrontations in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. Palestinian news and information agency Wafa correspondent said that a Palestinian had been shot in the chest during the confrontations that broke out after Israeli troops barged into the refugee camp of Al Ain in Nablus, surrounding a house there. Muhammad Abdul Hakim Nara, aged 23, was taken to the hospital in a critical condition, but shortly after was pronounced dead. Israeli forces raided the camp amidst intense shooting, resulting in confrontations with Palestinian youths. Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum, or Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum, was held in May on Wednesday by the Presidential Guard after talks failed. A source close to the presidency stated at the end of the talks, the Presidential Guard refused to release the president and the army gave him an ultimatum. In a message posted on Twitter, renamed X, Niger's president indicated that on Wednesday morning, elements of the Presidential Guard launched an anti-republican movement and tried in vain to gain the support of the National Armed Forces and the National Guard. The history of Niger, a former French colony, a poor country ravaged by jihadist violence, has been marked by coups d'etat and coup attempts since its independence in 1960. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.